All right, welcome everybody back to another episode of the Big Douglas Show. George Carmy is in the co-host chair, and our guest today is Mitch Tischler, the big fella. Mitch, how are you, bud?
I'm doing great. How you guys doing?
Doing good, man. It's an exciting time to be a Commanders fan. I can't say that we've said that in a while. We'll obviously get to a bunch of Commander stuff, but I thought maybe we'd play a little trivia before we got started. I've got little things here. You guys can shout these things out together. There's no winners or losers here. There are 5 teams that don't have their logos on their helmets. Can you get all 5?
Do the Steelers count, Doug? Because they have the half logo.
No, the Steelers don't count.
Okay.
The Browns. Patriots. Well, depending, I guess, on what logo you want to count for them.
The new Patriots logo is the logo. It's on the helmets. That one.
Okay.
Interesting.
Browns work.
Good
Panthers?
question, Doug.
Yeah, it's not the Panthers. There's, let's see, of what's left, there are 3 NFC teams and an AFC team.
I'm trying to think.
This became harder than I expected.
Yeah.
The Eagles logo is actually a big flying bird, but they have a wing on the side of their helmet.
Gotcha.
So
I'm trying to see what you're going with that.
Oh, yeah, that's
Gotcha. Okay.
right. Okay, so like
Do the Giants count? They have the NY, but they say Giants sometimes.
Yeah.
the NY is what they use, just like
Okay.
Commanders isn't on the list because we use the W,
The
on the
W.
side of the helmet. So
the Bengals.
the Bengals.
Bengals is a good one, actually. You could call.
Yep. Let's see. The
Rams count?
The
Because
Rams are one. So you've got
Okay.
one left.
Yeah,
It's
that
not-
like swooshy thing, like logo thing. that
right.
sorta-
It's just like the horn or whatever. Yeah.
yeah.
And there's one left on this one. It's an NFC
The
North.
Vikings.
It's the
Vikings. Gotcha. Okay, cool.
good
There you
call.
go. Cool. There you
Good
go.
call.
Cool.
There are 4 teams with a star on their helmet.
Titans. That's a sleeper one.
Cowboys.
Cowboys.
Titans and the Cowboys. 2 more.
Texans.
Patriots.
Texans count and Patriots.
There you go. Got it.
There
Cool.
you go. Nailed that
There
one,
you go.
guys.
There you go. Good stuff.
And one last for the helmets. There are 4 teams that have cats as their logos.
Their logos. Okay, so Panthers for one, sure.
Panthers,
Lions.
Lions.
Oh, yeah, Lions are good.
So Bengals doesn't count, right? Because it's a stripes.
Bengals does count. It's
Okay.
it's a cat.
Okay.
Okay.
One more.
Jaguars.
Jags.
There you go. Perfect. Got it. Cool.
Good call. Good call.
There it
Oh,
is.
very
There it
nice. Very nice, gentlemen. Yeah, I saw those the other day. I thought those were good.
A good way to get the blood flowing and
That's right.
the neurons snapping and whatever else has to happen in the brain.
Mitch, you were in the building for the Peters What was the vibe like? I mean, I'm assuming it was all high fives and everything, but the excitement probably was way up there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to poo-poo the Peters, excitement or whatever, but you get that excitement every time they bring in a new head coach, every time they bring in a new person who's in charge of, personnel and all that stuff. It was the same with Ron and Martin and Marty when they came in. Before that, it was the same with Gruden, the same with the Shanahan, So, there's a palpable excitement around the building, and it's not that different than other excitement in past years. I think the difference to me is kind of the smaller things, the scheduling and the planning and the communication, and it's a 2:00 presser and they're going to come out right at 2:00. And, I think the organization of the press conferences where, the mic is being passed orderly around and people just kind of everything is being run at a much higher level and a much, better, much more professional way, I would say. And the PR staff has done an incredible job over the past 4 years, 5 years. It's been pretty much that same group, and they've done an incredible job of trying to kind of fight the powers that be. And now I think you finally have like the support from above to run things the right way, and I think you're going to kind of continue seeing that met out that way.
How much of that non-football type staff, if you will, usually stays over between these kind of shifts?
Not much, but it depends on the guys they bring in. The biggest thing that I like about what Josh Harrison and Adam Peters are doing is that Josh is saying, hey, Adam, you go do what you want to do. He's going to hire a coach. Then Ben Johnson, most likely. Ben Johnson, you go evaluate the offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators, pick your guys, and kind of work your way down. It was respectable the way that they let Ron kind of walk out of the building at the end. Feel about that however you want. Martin and Marty still being in their roles right now is more just I think a function of time and allowing the folks that are going to be making decisions to do the interviews they want to do and start kind of working their way down the line and figure out who fits and who doesn't fit. If you look back at the Ron Rivera when he came in, basically everything but the scouting department changed pretty quickly. And then on the field, you saw, within a year, it was like 45 of the 53 on the, 53-man roster turned over. So there's going to be a fair amount of turnover. And, I think you're going to see some adjustments to the business side of the team as well. I'm not guessing on firings or not firings. I just think there will be some changes in the way that things are run. And overall, you're just, you're seeing a guy come in who has run professional organizations before, knows the correct way to run them. And to me, I like that he's coming in humbly and, bringing in folks to help him, do the interviews. And he's not sitting there saying, I'm the guy, I know everything. I'm going to make these decisions. So I just think you're seeing from top to bottom, much more professional organization.
They brought in a ton of coaching options to interview, which makes a ton of sense. I hear people all the time that say, why would you interview them if you know you're always going this way? It's like, well, why wouldn't you get all the free information that you could, right? I mean, other than your time. Are there any names that they brought in or not brought in that have surprised you?
I was surprised that they didn't do an official with Bill Belichick.
Just for the information, right?
Or Vrabel or Harbaugh, for that matter. I think all three of those guys don't fit what Josh Harrison company are building, and that's fine. I still would have thought you would have, at least had a discussion with them. But that doesn't mean that just because they didn't have an official interview with Bill Belichick doesn't mean that, folks in the NFL aren't talking. You can look at this head coaching search and, they've done the virtual interviews with Ben Johnson and company. But heck, we're 2-3 weeks into this process and we've kind of known it's going to be Ben Johnson for a while, or at least he's been the candidate, the favorite. As much as there's tampering amongst players and, there's the tampering amongst coaches and leaders as well, coordinators. So I think that, I was a little surprised that they didn't officially talk to those folks, but that's really kind of it. I like that they interviewed as many people as they did and as many wide-ranging people as they did, from defensive coordinators to associate head coaches to offensive guys. I love that they gave Bieniemy an interview, which he obviously deserved in and of itself, but there's no one that knows this team and this player personnel in the league better than Eric Bieniemy right now.
Yeah,
he's the most veteran guy, most veteran coach on this team. I hope they grilled his butt for 6 hours and went down to the third string tight end and the fourth string safety and discussed, everything under the sun with him because, as much as I don't think that he's really a true candidate for the head coaching job, I want all the information I can get out of him as early as possible and try and help whoever the head coach is be as set as possible when he steps in.
Mitch, real quick question. So what went wrong with Eric Bieniemy? Like, obviously, we hear some things in regard to maybe locker room tension or maybe his offensive system didn't really apply to the Commanders. But he was well heralded. He came in from the Kansas City Chiefs, an innovative offensive coordinator. Like, what went wrong in DC? What do you think your opinion was?
The locker room stuff I'll get to. I think that's kind of a separate issue, not related to not Bieniemy's fault or really anything. I don't think it really affected Bieniemy's time. Bieniemy is a well-respected man and person, and
Mm-hmm.
I love the way that he attacked this team and brought in some grit and kind of forced these guys to play football like everyone grew up playing in little league, or not little league, but in when you were a kid, running from station to station,
Mm-hmm.
doing up downs when you drop a football, like just kind of all the little things that are like that kind of keep you concentrating, throughout a full practice and through a training camp. Ultimately, though, I think his offense lacked. I think that he didn't adjust to the team that he had, and for a lot of the season, he was trying to pound a square peg into a circle hole. And at the end of the day, new age offenses throw the ball a lot, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm on board with throwing the ball a lot and using some of that short passing as a 50-50 run game type thing. But ultimately, I think his problem was he didn't get the ball into his best players' hands. And there are coaches who are very confident in their offensive systems and say, hey, you got to adjust to my system to get open, because my system will get you open if you're on board. Whereas other guys, you see, Kevin O'Connell up in Minnesota does an incredible job of getting the ball to Justin Jefferson. Ben Johnson does a great job of getting the ball to Amon-Ra St. Brown. Teams have playmakers, and you can be confident and you can love your offensive system. But if your guys aren't getting the ball in positions to make big plays, then you got to adjust. And that didn't really happen this year. And I think he almost got more dug in as he started having success in the second half of some of those games early in the year, and was all in on throwing the ball 50 times a game. And, I feel bad for Sam Howell, because I think, it clearly stunted his growth. And I think he's a kid who has potential. He just ended up in a really bad situation for him, and with an offensive coordinator that just didn't get the job done and didn't ultimately create an offense that, was built around the skill of both the quarterback and your skill players there.
It's amazing how quickly the quarterbacks have to get it figured out, right? Because every year there are a new crop of quarterbacks that come in, and you just don't have the time that you used to. Like, whether Sam Howell was going to be a great quarterback or not, I mean, I think that's a different debate. But what happened to him last year may be through no fault of his own. Just the timing was not right,
Yeah.
and he's going to get moved past, right? I mean, there's no
Well,
way
and
that he makes it.
to me, I mean, you look at like Jordan Love up in Green Bay, and it's a different situation up there. They do an incredible job of both identifying great quarterbacks, but more than identifying good football players, they identify players who have the humility to sit for 4 years. You think about so many of these young quarterbacks who get drafted in the first round, and they expect to step right in and play and be great. And they don't, and I don't know that there are many of them that would be willing to sit multiple seasons to do to run the Jordan Love, playbook. But as it pertains to Sam Howell, his career's not over. He has 2 more years here in DC where they'll probably be backing up whoever they pick at number 2, which is fine. But you see plenty of quarterbacks who break out after, sitting somewhere and go out and go elsewhere and succeed. And I think that he's going to learn a lot in the next couple of years. And I think that he has enough good on tape that when he does become a free agent, he'll get an opportunity. No one's going to sign him to be their day one starter, but folks will bring him in and give him an opportunity to compete. And at the end of the day, that's all you can ask for. And I think that he's going to have a long NFL career. And I think he'll get a couple seasons in there where he'll be a starter and be able to do what he wants to do.
With some extra experience, he kind of gives me Baker Mayfield vibes. You know what I mean? Like, I took Baker a couple of years of seasoning, got the right opportunity down there with a coach that really helps and is good on quarterbacks.
I don't know that folks. I don't. There are plenty of Commanders fans who love Sam Howell and everything that he is. I like Sam. I don't know that he has the same traits that Baker has.
Okay.
The same physical traits that Baker has. You can't forget that Baker was a number 1 overall pick and is a pretty spectacular quarterback when he gets in a rhythm. But I do agree in theory about what Sam could be.
It is Cosme's up for an extension. How quickly would you be running to give Cosme probably what would be a fairly big paycheck?
Um, I, I think folks would be surprised that I hesitate there.
I'm about to say,
I'm
yeah, I was
not.
surprised
You
by
did, and
that.
I am.
I'm not sending him a blank check. He's the
Well,
best offensive lineman that this team has. Um, I think that he's a good guard, and I know that there are folks who are all in on PFF and their numbers and their rankings and all that, and in that case, they would want a blank check to go to him. I think you got to figure out your tackle situation first, and to me, the two most important positions on that O line are going to be your left tackle and your center. And I think that you got to get those things figured out first. And if you have to go out into free agency to sign both of those guys, and you're locked up at 60 mil, 50 mil between two key pieces, I don't know that you can afford to pay Cosme 15 or 20 mil a season, which is what ultimately he's probably going to ask for. So I think that I do want him here long term. Don't get me wrong. I think that he's a great piece, and I think he's a good locker room guy and all that stuff. I just think you got to figure out if the number two pick is going to be quarterback, then there needs to be a direct plan for how you're going to address the O line after that. And if your plan is, in free agency as opposed to the draft, finding starters, then you got to figure out your money, because we've seen on the defensive side of the ball what happens when you tie up big money in non-premier positions. You find yourself in a tough spot there. And if they end up on the offensive side of the ball the way they are on the defensive side of the ball in terms of monetary breakdown, you're going to have some problems trying to build out a competitive roster there. So it's I think we're finally in an era where there's not where there's going to be adults running the cap and running the player personnel, and you're not going to have emotional decisions to contracts being made, which I would argue at least one of those big contracts in the middle of the defensive line was an emotional contract from local kid that folks love. Yeah. So I think that I want Sam Cosme here. It's just not a blank check for me.
Will the emotional, real quick, George, will the emotional kid be back next year?
I was going to say something like that.
I think a lot of it's going to come down to who comes in as head coach and defensive and defensive coordinator to see whether those guys fit. I got to imagine that everyone up top is looking at that, $200 million or $180 million that's locked up in two defensive tackles, and feel that that's a boulder on their back that they got to find a way to shake, because you just can't have that much money in interior defensive linemen, particularly when they're not Aaron Donalds.
That was the first thing that came to my mind.
Aaron Donalds,
that'd be great if they're two Aaron Donalds.
They're just not game wreckers, and I feel bad, like talking about them that way, because they're both good players. Duran and John are both good players. They're just not. We've seen it happen. They're just not game wreckers, and if you're going to pay that much money, you got to do something. So I think there's going to be a change on that defensive line. Yes, whether it's John or Duran, I'm not entirely sure. To me, I would rather have Duran Payne. I think he's a more disruptive player. I think John Allen's a little more consistent, but I'm kind of tired of consistent play.
Yeah,
this team needs big plays, and they need guys who can go out there and do it. And so to me, I would rather have Duran, but we'll see what ends up happening.
To that end, that's what I was kind of curious about. So I know last year Sam Cosme there was some frustrations about being moved from tackle to guard, and he was a little bit frustrated, kind of expressed that to the media. And we saw John Allen very frustrated as well. I was kind of curious, has Cosme, you said he's a good locker room guy. I was kind of curious about the state of the locker room. Is Cosme in a better state now mentally? And I know halfway through the year, it seemed like it was pretty rocky inside the locker room. So I was kind of curious about that as well.
Yeah. So what Ron Rivera does well is he was a good people person. And the players liked him. You heard it from everyone in the locker room. They liked him as a person. And honestly, we all liked him as a person too. Like, he's a good dude, just not a good football coach, and doesn't do the things that, you need from a head coach. And, when we go to Ben Johnson, there's more to being a head coach than being great at X's and O's. And that's going to be the big question when he comes in is, can he do the other parts of it? Can he be the leader? Can he get guys to follow? Can he be, can he get them fired up to go out and play? So those are the big things. My biggest problem with Ron Rivera when he was the coach was the positional flex shenanigans that he loved to talk
I
about.
think we all were.
If you're not good enough to be a tackle in college and they have to play you at both tackle and guard, then you're not going to be good enough to be a tackle in the NFL. Like that's just the way it is. And it's great to have the experience, but you look across the league and a lot of the elder tackles can then move to guard because they have that experience and they can work on it. The locker room as a whole is like the guys get along well, which is important, especially when you look at how bad things have gone, especially last year. I think what's missing in the locker room and what I've been kind of on my high horse about is they need a team leader in there. They need a captain who's not, who gains the respect of the players around him and isn't just flapping his lips. You need a London Fletcher type guy. You need and it's tough because you have to find a guy who can both play the game of football, but also be a leader of men.
Who's the closest thing they have to that right now?
They don't.
I don't.
Okay.
To me, that's the issue is that you have, John Allen's a captain, and he came from Alabama, so he's been in winning locker rooms. But on the NFL side, almost all their captains and guys came up in this organization and haven't been elsewhere and haven't seen how things work and haven't seen, what it takes to get a group of guys together to go out and play hard. And, to me, I think it shows itself every Sunday when the teams come out flat and it takes until the middle of the first quarter or the second quarter for them to get going or after halftime or whatever. Part of that is you got to have somebody in the locker room that's challenging them, that's getting them ready to go. And, that gets players, pumped up and it can come from a head coach. It can come from a coordinator. It can come from a strength and conditioning coach. It can come from a player. I just think that there's not a lot of vocal leaders in that locker room. And I think that's something that John Allen has tried to take on to be that vocal leader, but that's not who he is. That's not he's not the most outspoken guy in the world. And, Terry McLaurin is a great leader in and of himself, but he's a do as I do, not do as I say type guy. And you got to have somebody who can rally the troops and get everyone going. And so that's the biggest thing that's been missing in the locker room to me is that you just don't have a guy who's galvanizing and can get these guys to get fired up to go out there and play. And, you can question whether NFL players paid millions of dollars should need that, but It's something that good teams have.
I posed this question to Chris Russell. He was on the show last week. If they only pay one guy big money, would you give or whatever big money is, would you rather give it to Kendall Fuller or to Cam Curl?
To me, it's an easy one. I love Kendall Fuller, and I think he's a great player. And, again, he's a guy kind of like Terry McLaurin where, he's showing a lot of these young guys kind of how to do it. But if you're taking a long look at what this team is going to be and what it's going to become, I don't know that paying a 30-something, corner really makes sense when you have
30. He was only 29 last year. He just seems old as hell.
He does seem old as hell. Turns 30. But I think Cam Curl does a lot of different things for this team. And ultimately, we haven't seen him play a true safety role since his rookie year. That he's been asked to play all over that secondary and do a ton of different things. I'm so happy we're not going to have to talk about Buffalo nickel anymore. Any of that shenanigans, like, you're gonna have two safeties. You're gonna have a free safety, a strong safety, and they're gonna play up top, and that's what most traditional NFL defenses have. I'm excited to see what Cam can do when he can lock into one position and not have to, run the entire secondary from the safety spot. So I like Cam a lot. He's my guy.
How many of these guys get a big bump simply from better coaching?
Good question.
Not even from better coaches.
Without kind of Fuller, that cornerback room
Exactly
looks kind of scary. You got Emmanuel Forbes and St. Juice as the starters outside.
Maybe less coaching and more schematically. I think this defense, particularly the secondary, but across the board, I think will be much better when we get away from this archaic, Ron JDR defense that they were running, and the hesitancy to blitz and to bring pressure just creates a situation that your secondary is just covering forever, and part of the reason they get killed is because the quarterbacks sit back there for hours on end before they have to throw a football. So I think a little bit more of an aggressive defense, a little bit. The players were having trouble, trying to ghost what they were doing and confuse quarterbacks. And I think that comes from coaching. I think that comes from on-field schematics, getting guys in the right place. So I expect things will improve with a better defensive attack, but ultimately the guys are who they are. Emmanuel Forbes is who he is.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Mitch, is he savable? What do you think about that? Do you think is it more of a physical detriment, or is it more like schematics? What do you think was his biggest issue this year?
He's savable. The people who are writing him off after one season are crazy to me. Mm-hmm. Is he going to always be limited? Yes. Mm-hmm. When you draft somebody who weighs $170 soaking wet, they're going to have their limitations because of the physical size. Mm-hmm. But it was semi-similar to when they brought in William Jackson. They're trying to fit square pegs into circle holes, and even beyond that, they were trying to fit square pegs into circle holes that they thought were covered in gold, and they weren't. I think that part of the problem is that it was the draft was where these guys were drafted and how all that stuff went down. But yes, they're all I think Benjamin St-Juste has an opportunity to be a NFL corner, to be a consistent NFL corner. But this flip-flop, it goes back to the positional flex thing. It goes back to what they were trying to do on defense. There was just little consistency for folks to learn their positions. And, we talked to Percy Butler about, kind of his transition. And he's like, I came in and they gave me 4 playbooks. I had strong safety, weak safety. I had Buffalo nickel, and I had a corner. And he's like, it's hard enough to learn one position in the NFL. It's hard enough to figure out on every play what you're supposed to do. But then when you fill your head with 4 different, roles, then, when they make a check in the secondary, it's not an automatic check. You have to think, okay, right now I'm playing Buffalo nickel. So that check means I'm man with the slot receiver or whatever. But if he was a strong safety, that means he's a single high or whatever it may
complex.
Mean. And so, they have a lot of young guys who have a lot of information swirling around in their heads, and they haven't been able to lock in at individual positions, or even if you want to break up safety and corner as different positions. I think that kind of identifying roles will help these guys a lot and get them moving in the right direction forward, because these guys were thinking way too much and not playing enough. And especially with Emmanuel Forbes.
And it showed on tape. It's interesting that you say that, Mitch, and I had not heard that before, but it makes a ton of sense. Yes, we were every Tuesday with Mark Bullock, we break down the film, the All-22. Yeah. And last week we were looking at Mike McDonald, looking at potential head coaches, and you could see the communication on that Ravens defense. We don't have to talk about the disparity in talent, just literally the communication on where to be and when. Those guys are always in the right spot. And I don't know if anything drove me more crazy watching the Commanders play defense than seeing a guy a second and a half before the snap, obviously not knowing where at all he was supposed to be or where the next guy next to him was going to end up being. And it was frustrating.
I mean, can you imagine Cam Curl playing in that Kyle Hamilton role in a Mike McDonald defense? You get Kyle Hamilton is an extremely good football player. I'm not taking anything away from him, but Cam Curl can play close to that level or at that level if given the opportunity to. But the fact that he's bouncing around all over the place, and honestly, I don't want to give Jamin Davis many excuses or the linebackers many excuses, but across the board, guys were dealing with these issues where they were playing half Will, half Mike linebacker. They're playing half, strong, half, slot corner. They were playing guard and tackle. They were playing X and Z, wide receiver. You just have guys that you're putting too much information too quickly on young guys who need to lock into how the NFL is played. You know, bringing like Jamison Crowder is a good example of a guy who he can play X, Y, or Z. Like we know he's a Z. You know, he's most likely a slot receiver. He's best in the slot, but he's a veteran and he's been around NFL offenses and he's been around NFL coordinators and he's been around different quarterbacks and he can adjust to these different roles. And that's something that when you look at the offensive line with, you know, I like the idea of Charles Leno possibly coming back, not as a starter maybe, but as kind of that backup swing tackle and somebody who can also, you know, step in and play guard in a pinch and can help, you know, the offensive line as a whole kind of adapt to what Ben Johnson, Frank Haley, whoever it is that's going to be running that offense wants. And I think that's an important piece. And, you know, especially with a team as young as the Commanders are at key positions, I think that's something that will help everybody out across the board when this new regime comes in.
And Mitch, to that extent, like, you know, obviously the team was underachieving this year at poor record. Which side of the ball do you think needs more help? Like, it's very easy to say the defense was, you know, one of the worst in the entire league, 32nd overall, but that might be scheme. And we might see a lot of turnover on the offensive side of the ball with, you know, Curtis Samuel potentially leaving and Antonio Gibson leaving. Like, and the offensive line's kind of in shambles there too. Like, which side of the ball do you think needs more help? And do you think like Curtis Samuel and Antonio Gibson are, you know, big pickups and we should retain them? What do you think?
I think both those guys are probably gone.
Okay.
But I mean, you look at, I'm going to use Ben Johnson because I think we all agree that he's going to be the head coach.
Yeah.
You look at that Ben Johnson offense in Detroit, and you think about the Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery duo.
Yeah.
How much does that feel like Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson, right? Like, I don't know that Antonio Gibson is the athlete that Jahmyr Gibbs is, but and I don't know that Brian Robinson is as good between the tackles as David Montgomery. But you can see that dichotomy between those two running backs.
Yeah.
I think the biggest place they need to upgrade is tight end. I think that you got to at the NFL these days, you have to have an athletic tight end that can go out and catch the ball. And, you know, maybe that's, I don't know if folks, you know, kind of remember Amari Rodgers, you know, had the Achilles injury at the beginning of the season. He might be that guy, you know, maybe there's a guy in free agency, whatever it may be. I think there's going to be more turnover on the offensive side of the ball. I think the defensive side of the ball has so many young guys that are on their rookie deals that they're not going to necessarily, that they're not necessarily going to turn over that entire group. So I think the offense is going to change a lot more.
Thanks.
George, my dog's sitting right next to me, and
yeah, that was my dog. I don't know whose dog was barking. All three of us have dogs.
It's mine.
All right, go ahead.
Big Hank's not happy about something out there.
Yeah.
I'm sure the ups man stopped by. They've got some of these pieces on the offensive line, Mitch, that we have no idea about. What are your thoughts like on Ricky Stromberg? To me, it's interesting, right? With the center position, you could load up that offensive line with young guys and rookies, but to me, they might be better off going out and trying to find a veteran center, particularly if you have a rookie quarterback, just to have somebody help with the checks and the calls and seeing things. To me, I know that this is a good year to need a center in the draft, but to me, pairing a rookie center with a rookie cornerback, while theoretically makes sense, I don't think it makes a lot of sense. What are they going to do at center this year?
So here's the one thing that I like, and again, I'm assuming it's going to be Ben Johnson as the head coach.
It's like the worst kept secret ever, right? This Ben Johnson deal.
Yeah, I mean, it's so weird to like you keep having to like, you know, say I think it's going to be, but you know, we all kind of know what it is. I think it was Tom Pelissero on Inside the NFL was talking about Frank Haley, who's the offensive O-line coach with the Lions, would probably be the offensive coordinator that comes in. He went to Gaithersburg High School, first of all, which is cool.
There you go.
So he knows about the Redskins lore and all that. But more so, he was a center. He was a undrafted center. Played 10 years in the NFL. You know, you want to talk about a guy who's going to bring in grit and, you know, that kind of attitude. That's that kind of guy. B. Mitch played with him a little bit, I think, in Philly. And he was saying that Brian Mitchell was saying, like, you know, he's a guy that's not going to take anything from anybody. And I love that idea. What's great about what Josh Harris is doing in this entire group is they're letting the people who are in charge be in charge of, you know, the players under them. If Frank Haley can't step in and help make Ricky Stromberg, what the best version of Ricky Stromberg that he's going to be, he'll know pretty quickly whether that guy can be a starting NFL center or deserves to be a starting NFL center, or whether they need to go out and get that kind of help. And so I think Stromberg has the tools to do it. Generally, rookie, quarterback, center scares me a little bit, but I don't want to bring in a veteran just to bring in a veteran. It's got to be a guy who makes sense and is good. And quite frankly, I haven't gone through the free agent center list very hard, because I think that they're going to try and run it with Ricky Stromberg. So to me, I think Cosme's the only guaranteed starter that's back from this offensive line, and there may be four new names.
I would definitely be interested in giving Leno some kind of extension that brought that number down. People are excited to run Leno out of town, and I'm not exactly sure why. I mean, I understand he's not, top 5 left tackle anymore, but again, if you've looked at the free agent tackle list, it's like not a good year to need O-line if you're trying to get them in free agency. I would be excited to have him if the number's right.
I would want him on the roster. First of all, I think folks forget, the same thing happened with Kirk Cousins. Folks don't really give him credit. The best ability is availability. Mm-hmm. And the fact that Leno is out there playing, even when he plays hurt and doesn't play well, but he's out there playing, giving it what he's got, I think, is beyond commendable. There's only 2 ways that I want Leno back. I either want him back as a placeholder starter with a true developmental young left tackle working underneath him, and whether that's a 2nd or 3rd round guy, whatever it may be, or I want them to bring in have a young left tackle who's ready to start, and Leno is your kind of backup swing tackle. Or if Leno can start on the right side, maybe that's the move for him across the board. But if you go into this season without starting to develop your long-term starting left tackle, then I think you're doing a disservice to whatever quarterback you draft.
It'll be interesting because not only do they need that help. Now, I'm just trying to figure out, you spend that number 2 overall pick on a quarterback. I think that feels like chalk at this point.
Yeah.
But then with the 2 second-round picks, you're right. They need tackle help bad, and they got no ends. I mean, who's playing defensive end this year? I mean, I'd like
defensive end in free agency.
Hill back, but does he move the needle for you? No, not really. So I mean,
but in free agency this year, the defensive end,
that's right. But I mean, will the Panthers let Brian Burns out of the building? I don't know. The Jaguars say they're not going to let John Allen out of the building. So it's like, yes, on paper it looks like a really good year to need an end, but if those 2 guys stay, then you're looking at like the Boses of the world that may be available, and I'm just.
And Mitch,
I think it'll be a weird year.
Here's the thing: the way the roster construction under the previous regime was doo-doo. You can't step up into and have your top 5 defensive ends all be free agents at the end of the year.
Yeah.
That's just mind-bogglingly stupid or tough to handle. This isn't. Not every hole is going to get filled this year.
That's
right. Like this team isn't. As much as 19 of the last 21 years, a team has gone from last to first in their division. There's no reason the Commanders can't do it, because I do think the NFC East is starting to enter a little bit of murky waters. Mm-hmm. But you're not gonna fill every need with a star this year. It's gonna be a build. It's gonna take time, and so I think it's a balance of figuring out. Do you pay to speed up the defensive end portion of it, or do you let Andre Jones and KJ Henry and whoever else you're able to kind of bring in make do, quote unquote, for the year? What are you going to do with John Ridgeway and Fedarian Mathis? Because there's no right. It just makes no sense to have both of those guys who play the same role and do the same thing. One of them stays healthy, one of them can. There's going to be some pretty major overhaul here across the board, on both sides, and you're not going to be able to fix everything in one offseason.
All right, Mitch, we kind of wrap these things up two ways. I'm curious who you like for the weekend, but before we get there, been asking folk how long realistically is they're not calling it a rebuild. It's a nasty word, but how long do you think it is? How many years before this team realistically is a year in, year out competitor?
So what I've been saying is I think by year two, they can be a double digit win team. And by year four, I think consistently competing for uh, real prizes, and real prizes meaning NFC championships and trips to Super Bowls and winning playoff games and stuff like that. And so I think, you know, hopefully next year is, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 wins, somewhere in that, middle range. I think 2 years from now, you get to 10 and a wild card roll. And then 3 years, hopefully you're winning your first playoff game. And in 4 years, you're sitting there, trying to win a Super Bowl, trying to legitimately win a Super Bowl.
Mitch, what would be a successful year for you next year? Like, the offensive system looking pretty good, the quarterback looking decent. Like, what do you think would be a good year for you?
I think the biggest thing is stability,
Mhm.
with a stable offense that comes with success running
Mhm.
the ball and throwing the ball and having a quarterback, looking like he's the part,
Mhm.
and can play that role. I don't want to put a win total number on it, that's a successful season, because ultimately I think it's about growth as a whole. And there are going to be major holes next year on this roster that aren't filled and are going to take a little bit of time to get going. I've been kicking around this idea in the back of my head, and maybe I'm ready to give it to you guys first.
Yeah,
I
here we
wouldn't
go.
hate the idea of going whichever quarterback fits the Ben Johnson system best, whoever Ben Johnson likes best between Jaden Daniels and Caleb May, you know, pick that guy. And maybe if you think you're going to be picking 15 or 16 next year, middle of the road, maybe you look to pick off another top 10 pick, move back up into the top 10 and go get, whether it's Marvin Harrison Jr. or the left tackle, whatever it is,
Mhm.
package, one of your 2 second rounds, a second, a third this year and a first next year. And you jump back up into, and maybe it takes a little more than that. And if you look at the chart, but
Yeah.
I
And
wouldn't
he,
hate the idea of doing what they did
Texans
when
did
they,
it. Yeah.
yeah.
yep. And I like
Certainly, I
that.
don't know that they're doing to the Texans level of,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
going
But,
there.
Yeah.
but even at
2-3, exactly.
But
But yeah.
even at 15, you're looking at a guy like, say, Mims out of Georgia that can play left or right tackle.
Right.
Chop Robinson from, Penn State may still be there, a guy that could be effective at pass rushing. I actually have talked about that myself, Mitch. I don't hate the idea of jumping back up in there somewhere if you like the value of what you're getting there and getting up to Alt or Fashanu probably is expensive, but even if you could get one of those guys right in the middle there, I think it's the value, particularly with the 5th year option, I think is worth it.
I'll tell you what, I love, who's the kid from Oregon State? Fuaga or
Yeah,
Mhm.
Fugaga, whatever,
yeah.
however his name is pronounced. Uh, I I was just watching a little bit of a couple of games or cut ups of his, and the kid's a mauler. I mean, I think he could be a very very good mid first round, a tackle that could step in and play right away.
All right, let's wrap with this. Who do you guys like for the AFC Championship game this weekend?
I keep talking myself out of it, but I think the Ravens win, but the Chiefs cover. But
Mhm.
by all accounts, the Ravens, every time the Ravens have a big game against a, major opponent, they blow them out. And
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm such a disbeliever, but here I am disbelieving them again. But I do think they're going to win. And I do think they actually ultimately win the Super Bowl. But I don't think I don't know that they're going to cover against the Chiefs. And then I'm happily all on board the Lions Express. I think they're going to cover the 7 points against the Niners, and I think they are going to give them one hell of a football game and might win outright.
It's a
Uh,
crazy
I
spread. I was amazed that the spread was that high.
I mean, listen, the Niners are doing to the NFC what the Ravens are doing to the AFC.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
get it.
They don't take prisoners. I think the Debo injury is enormous.
Huge. Yeah.
I the rant. I think the The Lions do a really good job of stopping the run, and I think if they put a ton of pressure on Purdy, as much as Purdy has done a good job in his couple seasons, I think that he's due for a Purdy-esque game. And that Lions secondary isn't great. They give up a ton of yards to everybody who's there, but no Debo, I think, makes a big difference. And ultimately, I think
that kid Lions gets after it too.
Dude, can you imagine? I mean, you keep drooling over having a defensive end, like that who can get after the quarterback, and he's just so damn likable. Like,
yeah, he is.
Montez Sweat was the same. Like, so likable. Like you want to root for that guy because he plays his butt off, and cares so much about the game.
They were sad to have to let Montez Sweat go. They did not want to do that. The value was too good.
Yeah, and you weren't gonna. You can't pay Montez $100 million in a rebuild, and you can call it not a rebuild all you want, but and you still have the $200 million between Daron Payne and John Allen, which is just such a monkey on the back of the salary cap. They have a ton of space here, but I mean, it's just such a heavy price to pay, for a non-exclusive position.
George, you're going to be at the Ravens game this week. It ought to be a blast, man. That's a hell of a place to watch a game, AFC Championship. I assume you'll be rooting for the Ravens since you're there.
It's hard, man. My whole life I kind of hated the Ravens, and I'm a Marylander at heart. I grew up in Montgomery County, so I'm going to root for Maryland. I'm kind of sick of watching Patrick Mahomes win year after year too. It's kind of cool to switch it up a little bit. So I kind of do want to see Lamar. It's going to be an awesome game. Lamar versus Patrick Mahomes in the AFC Championship.
Dude, it's going to be a great game.
I'm pumped for it. We'll see. And I'm also rooting for the Lions in the NFC, so we'll see how that goes. So a great game. I'm pumped for it.
It's been amazing to see Lamar's kind of transformation is probably not right, but Monken brought in an actual NFL system and let it run it. And you could tell, I think it was last week after the game, one of the comments he made was like, well, I've got the keys to the car now. And that's not because they wouldn't let him drive it before, but like that offense that Monken brings, it just gets people open, and they are throwing the rock around. And for once, he's a quarterback that's using his legs instead of legs that's trying to get to the passer. So I think it's been great for him. I'm excited to watch him play each week. And dude, I don't know how many people in the league you'd take over Lamar right now. I mean, I don't. I guess we could argue Patrick, right?
Yeah.
If you want to do that, that's fine. I think that's where the list stops.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think I love Lamar, and coming out of college, I loved him. I loved what the Ravens picking Lamar, trading back into the first round to get Lamar Jackson so they could get the fifth year for him, just shows like organizational direction and planning and leadership and all those different things.
And had a plan for him.
What?
And had a plan for him.
Right.
And then let's say, hey, do this.
That's what I'm so excited about this Adam Peters, Josh Harris, Ben Johnson thing, is that there's going to be a plan. There's going to be an organizational direction, and everyone's going to be, it's going to be get on board or get out. And, you're going to see, hopefully, this group start to make smart moves like that. It was just such a good move in the draft, and I'm excited for Lamar.
I am too. It's going to be a good weekend of football. Mitch, you're the best. Monumental Sports. When's the next installment of the podcast come out?
We just had one come out yesterday, and Saturday and Sunday morning on Monumental Sports on your TVs. You can watch the Beltway Football Pod, and on monumentalsports.com. You can watch it off the website as well, or on the Monumental Sports app. So all over the place with Monumental, and we'll have a recap and possibly a head coach presser next week if the Lions end up losing to the Niners.
And the crazy thing about this offseason, which will be one of the craziest in recent memory, they're going to start soon, right? Like, they're going to be back to action soon. Like, first-time head coaches, I think, get to do, like, preliminary stuff.
Oh, so early. Yeah.
Right. So, you're the best, buddy. Appreciate your time today. You know that.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Bye, guys.